All right. Welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools. And we are excited that both Trisha and I are here today. Trisha, it seems like it's been forever that you and I have been able to just do an episode together.
Yeah, and we're going to be doing episodes together all month long for May because we've got a little something special for listeners that I'm really excited to introduce today.
Yeah. And we've both been so busy consulting lately, which has been great. We've been able to, the great thing about this is why you co-host podcasts, by the way, if anybody's thinking of starting a podcast, because life gets busy and it's great to be able to carry on when somebody else can pick it up and keep the podcast episodes coming while you're running. In fact, you're headed off to London. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you're headed off to next?
The challenge is going to be like, will we both be in the same place and not have jet lag? I feel like we're trading off on that. Yeah, I'm headed to London. It is the ECIS, that's the European Council of International Schools. They've got their leadership event happening this spring. So it's going to be a lot of incredible school leaders. Again, talking about all things change, innovation, and I'm there to talk a little bit about the power of podcasting for school leaders. And Jeff and I love working with school leaders around this. Obviously, we believe in the power of podcasting. It's a great tool, I would say, for doing research. I don't know about you, Jeff. We both have been podcasting for a very long time. But I feel like it's almost like ongoing professional learning, right? You get to speak to a lot of folks, reach out, learn from people who you otherwise wouldn't. So I'm always advocating school leaders, if you are looking to get started with podcasting, do it. You will learn just so much.
Yeah. And hopefully one of these times our travels actually cross paths. Many listeners might not know this. And this is just something crazy to think about of the world we live in, that Trish and I have not physically been in the same place since, what we figured out? It was Milan, Italy in 2015, 14?
I think 2015 it must have been.
15 is the last time we were physically in the same place together. So just think about that, listeners. We've produced all these podcast episodes running Shifting Schools, and we have not even been able to physically hug each other for almost, 10 years now? We're going on 10 years, right? Isn't that crazy? So hopefully our paths cross soon. We will find a way here. And can you imagine if we actually did a podcast episode where we're in the same room together? It'll be like a 5-hour episode.
It would absolutely be surreal. Jeff, everything must feel a little surreal to you right now. You're still coming off jet lag from a huge trip to Singapore. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. I love Singapore.
Yeah. And you worked there for a while, so that's great. And thank you for the tips of when I was there. Yeah, I got to go and spend a week working with Singapore American School. Tons of just AI training, of course, working with everything from the head of school and the leadership team to start thinking about how do we start putting some guidance in place down to elementary and thinking about what does this mean for them? Just a lot of great conversations. We did a parent night around AI, which was really fun as well. A lot of great conversations continue to be happening in the space. And it's so fun right now working with schools and working with leaders around AI. And I don't know if you're seeing this, but there's so many light bulb moments, right? Where you're presenting or you're having these conversations and all of a sudden you just see the light bulb goes off. And it's what drove me as an educator back when I had kiddos in front of me. And it's the same thing when people are like, how do you like doing this? It's the same as teaching. They're just older. They're not fourth graders anymore. They're,
That's right.
40 somethings. Yeah. So it's awesome. But yeah, so it's great to catch up with you and be able to find some time to do these episodes. And let's talk a little bit about this amazing new menu that you have created for May. And part of what we are doing the month of May here is all about our micro menu month. And what an incredible menu of prompts that you have created. And we're going to be spending some time going through this. People will be able to download it. If you have access to our newsletter or you're a newsletter subscriber, you'll be able to get it that way. But talk a little bit about our new micro menu for the month of May.
Sure. So the concept is for the entire month of May, Each week, we're going to set you up with a different micro menu so that you can experiment with generative AI from a completely different context. Jeff, when you and I are talking to educators, we're usually advocating for experimentation. And I usually put a little bit of a catchphrase on that. You want to both be trying these tools out under the umbrella of your expertise to really see, is it really good at this thing that I am really good at? And you also want to experiment with it in contexts that you're unfamiliar with so that you can see from the standpoint of a learner, does this help me out? And so we really wanted to help people pivot between different contexts to see, recognize, and notice what are maybe some use cases for generative AI that aren't on the map yet. And we wanted to set all of this up in a social way. So you'll notice that inside the free guide, we have the prompts, we have a protocol, and then we also have an editable Google Doc so that your team can get set up playing around with the prompts and then generating your own. So Jeff and I are never saying, here, copy paste, just do this, end.
Yeah.
No, this is a creative, collaborative, community based experience. And that's what the free guide hopefully sets you up with. So when we are inviting you each week in the month of May to work with some peers, it might just be you and one other person. That's a team. Or it might be you and your whole department.
I love that. And I think this is one of the things that we are seeing as we continue to do these trainings is if you're just listening to people talk about AI and you're not actually interacting with it, it's really hard to understand how powerful this thing is. And so the thing I love about this menu is it gives you a framework to start thinking about. We give you what I call starter prompts. Like we're giving you the first prompt to get you started to also, one, to look at how prompts can be crafted. Two, for you to start to critically analyze and critically think about what is the output that I want. But you have to be able to get in and actually play with these tools. And we can't stress that enough. And I was just we were talking with a school district that reached out to us, and they were asking, we would like you to come and do trainings, but every training we've had so far, people have just told us about AI. And I was like, that's not what we do here at Shifting Schools. That's not how you have to be in it. If you're just listening to people talk about ChatGPT or Claude or whatever program you want, and you're not actively engaging in it, you're not understanding the power of it. And that's part of where we're at, is you've got to get in and play with this. And on this micro menu supports you in creating that structure to get in and start playing with it with a team. Because to your point, Trisha, the power of it isn't the prompt. The power of it is the conversation about what it created. That's the power. That's the power of using it with kids. That's the power of using it in your department. It's not about you prompting. It's about you prompting and then collaboratively, critically thinking about, what did it do? How did it do it? What's our next prompt? And I think that's a really good lens for people to be thinking about.
I totally agree. For me, the analogy that I often will use is for anybody that has bought a car, you don't just want to hear the car salesperson talk to you about all the different features. You're really making that decision once you're behind the driver's wheel, right? And if somebody is telling you, like, this feature of the car is really great, or this safety feature will transform the way that you get to work, you need to actually experience that for yourself to decide, oh, actually, like that new little feature, wow, yes, that does make a huge difference. Or maybe it doesn't. Yeah, this is, again, yet another way that we're trying to hand you the keys, open up the door, and say, get in the car, take it for a test drive, and take some people with you as well. You'll notice that inside the free guide, we're big believers in protocols. So you'll find inside that guide our protocol that's called Use, Fuse, News. So either when you're looking at some of the work that we've set you up with, you might immediately think of a context where you could use it, or the fuse is connect one of your own ideas, really think about your context, or the news piece might be, now I want to have a lengthier conversation about this with people. So again, we're really hoping that this new free guide, and inside the free guide, you're going to find micro menu for week 1 and week 2. We're hoping that free guide does set you up for some great collaboration.
Yeah. And it's just, again, it's something there to give you. And I use these protocols all the time, and we set them up this way. You do such an incredible job, Trisha. When I say we, Trisha does all this
Jeff,
work, right?
Thank you.
But you do such a great job of setting these up. And there are times, depending on your group, depending on who you're collaborating with, there are sometimes I will put this up on the screen and have people actually pick one of these things, right? On the use, fuse, and news. Or there are other times where if you are leading a conversation, you don't have to traditionally go through it, but you just are thinking in your own head, okay, how am I structuring questions that are pulling out the critical thinking that we need about this prompt? And so don't feel like, oh, you have to put this up on the screen and we all have to do this protocol. You don't have to do it that way. Again, it's there for you to just be a mental thought as a leader in these conversations around, okay, how can I structure some questions and make it your own? I think we can't stress that enough as we're going through this guide. This is here as a way to get you started, a way to support you. But also, to your point, we created it into a Google Doc so you can quickly go in and make the edits that you want and make it yours and customize it. And I think that's the thing that we love doing the most is every school we work with, every leader we work with, it all gets customized to your community, your school, whatever is used to you. So we're going to be jumping in here a little bit and going through our first of the menus in just a bit. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment just to talk about our sponsor. The whole reason why we can make these free menus and continue to podcast and share our knowledge and share the knowledge of others that we are interviewing throughout Shifting Schools is because of our sponsors here on the podcast and the sponsors of Shifting Schools at large, both for the podcast and the newsletter. So we did want to also talk about the sponsor for this podcast, who is Lebra. And you can head over to lebrahq.com. That's LEBRAHQ.com. And they're a fantastic program. The CEO reached out to me from Lebra, and we had a great conversation about how this is being leveraged right now in schools. And this platform is an AI infused platform. The platform's not about AI. The platform is about strengthening employee relationships. It's about creating community. And what this platform does is it actually hooks into your HR system, and it pulls in all of the people that work within your community, in your organization, in your district, in your school. And then using AI, it supports you in keeping those strong community connections. It automatically will put people into departments, or if you're in a large district, it'll put people into schools, however it's set up inside your HR system. It'll create that same organizational structure inside Lebra. Then what happens is every day a leader can come in and it automatically tells you, hey, it's been 5 days since you have made contact with Trisha. Or did you know that today is Trisha's work anniversary? She's been working for you for 15 years. And it just gives you these really quick moments to create community. And right inside the system, you can click on Trisha's name. You can even, if you'd like to, you can use AI to help write a quick email. You don't have to. If you want to write the email yourself, you can. But if you want to, they've got the AI right in there where you just go in and say a quick response about a work anniversary for Trisha. It'll help create that quick little email, and it'll automatically, you click a button, it connects into your Google account or your Microsoft account, whatever you use at your school, and sends out these emails. I think the coolest thing is how fast this is spreading across schools. It was originally created for hospitals, but there are a lot of schools that are finding, yes, this is how you create community. It's these small touch points. When you can send a quick email and your leader knows that they remembered your work anniversary, or they remembered that last night your child hit the winning shot for the basketball game, or had the winning spike for the volleyball team, and you get this quick email from your leaders talking about, oh, hey, congratulations last night on your kid making that. And it's just an incredible way to build community. And the responses that are coming back already from schools and how this is creating a positive culture cannot be overstated. And that's really what Lebra is. It's made for leaders. It's got AI infused in it, but more than AI, it's about creating community. So take a look at that, hq.com. We're very excited to have them as a partner. If you'd like to learn more, you can reach out to me, jeff@shiftingschools.com, and I will set you up with a interview and a free session with the CEO of Lebra, and we can have a session together where they can go over and he will go over the platform itself, how it's being leveraged. We are going to have an episode here coming up the end of May or 1st of June, excuse me, around listening to some leaders who are already using Lebra and how it is truly impacting their culture and their community of their organization. So be looking for that the end of this month or the 1st of June. But yeah, again, a shout out to Lebra. Thank you for sponsoring the podcast, sponsoring Shifting Schools, a great platform. You're going to want to go take a look at it. Lebra, LEBRAHQ.com. And if you have any questions, please reach out, Jeff@shiftingschools.com. Thank you, Lebra, for being the sponsor of this podcast and allowing us to create these free menus. All right, Trisha, let's dig back into this menu real quick. Questions we are getting lately and a quick thought on them. I want to talk to you first about, we are getting a lot of questions about handling change. And I think there's two parts to this that I'd really like to get you to talk about. Number one, how are we supporting leaders in handling that change? And I think a big part of that change is not just how are you handling change? How do you lead in a time of rapid change? And what are some of the things that you're talking to leaders about?
And I should say also, we do have a special course, Leading in the Era of AI for School Leaders. Initially, when we released that course, we said we were only going to keep it free for a month, but we had a number of folks reach out and say, hey, can you leave that open? And we have continued to do that. So you can get access to that free course over at shiftingschools.com. And we actually have an entire section on this question. So usually when we get asked this, sometimes I remind people, check out this course. Because part of what we talk about is Kurt Lewin has this great change theory called unfreeze, change, refreeze. And there's really two things that Lewin asks us to do. Number one is to understand what's likely to drive us towards embracing the change. Like, notice people who are really working on their AI literacy in your community. Why are they doing that? And ask that question, why? And secondly, you also need to really understand what's the friction that's causing resistance. Those people need to be listened to as well. Find out what's holding them back. And Jeff, often when I have that conversation with people about their resistance to AI, often a lot of it is this idea of, I don't know how to use it. I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to do it wrong. This is pretty common, I would say, with almost anything ed tech. There's a lot of pressure on educators who know they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing.
Or I don't understand what it's doing.
Exactly. And so that can be a real barrier. And that's why we often do talk about experiment. It's okay to make mistakes with this. You're going to make mistakes with it, but like all tools, with practice, you'll get a little bit better. I would really say when it comes to that handling change piece, really understanding that if you're thinking about that change model, I think for many schools, they're still in that unfreeze, that first stage of needing to really understand what's driving people towards the change and what's holding people back from learning more. And that takes us to another question that I know we've received a lot that I think is one of the barriers, people not knowing. And people often say to us, I don't know like which generative AI tool I should even start with. Jeff, I know you've got thoughts on that. So when we get asked, which tool do I start with? Which model should I be using? What do you usually say?
Yeah, and I think this is a great question. We get asked this all the time, and I think the problem became ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, and it seemed 3 months later there were 5,000 different generative AI tools, and now everybody's asking themselves, I don't even know which one to use. Like, where do I get started? What do I do? And so the first thing I like to do is help educators and just help people break this down to understand there are really only a couple of generative AI motherships. And if you can think almost of a hierarchy in your mind, if you can picture a hierarchy system, sitting at the top of that hierarchy, at the top of the mountain, there are only a couple of really generative AIs, right? You've got ChatGPT, which most people know about. You've got ChatGPT. You've got another one called Claude. You've got another one called Gemini that's coming from Google. And you've got a fourth one that's being created by Meta, aka Facebook. Those four, and there are a couple other lesser known ones, but really Those four sit at the top of the mountain right now. They're probably the four best. Again, there are others being created, but they're probably the four best. And what's happening, if you can think about this in your mind, those four are sitting at the top of the mountain. And then what's happening is all these other AI bots are being created based off of the training of those ones. So, for example, I know a lot of schools and teachers are using Magic School. Great program. Magic School isn't its own generative AI. It's actually using Chat GPT in the background. And the makers of Magic School have basically taken what's known as the API or a connection. They just connect into ChatGPT and then they code some coding around it and make it do specific things for educators. That's what Magic School is. But in the background, you're using ChatGPT. We talk about other tools. You've got a great over on our YouTube channel. Trisha's done a great job of looking at Diffit, looking at some other tools that teachers can use. So check out our YouTube channel for that. But all of these tools, most of them, and I would say most that we are using in education, are all being based off of ChatGPT. It is the largest. It is known to be the best. The other one that is out there is Claude, is being really good, but Claude seems to be really good for creative writing, not all general knowledge, but it is getting higher marks now than ChatGPT is specifically on creative writing. But seeing that in education, we want this whole knowledge base. The one number one that I train people on, and the reason why I train people on it is because it is the one that is being used to run every other AI is ChatGPT. And so that's where I think you should start. Now, there's a couple things to know about ChatGPT. Number one, just 2 weeks ago from when we're recording this podcast, so it would have been the, whatever it is, first week of April, they actually changed and you don't even need to sign up for an account. Which one of the barriers we had before was people were like, oh, I don't want to give my email to a company I don't know, or I don't know what they're going to do, and I'm going to get spammed. The nice thing is now is ChatGPT, if you just do a Google search for ChatGPT and you go to openai.com, and we'll put a link in the show notes so you can just click and go there. You don't even need to log in anymore. You can try it out for free and not even give them your email. You don't have to give them any information, which makes this menu that much easier to get started in. Nobody needs to know that you're practicing if that's something that you're worried about. It will not keep any of your conversations because you're not logged in, so it doesn't have any way to store them. But I am still recommending people to start with ChatGPT because here's the thing. If you know how to really prompt ChatGPT really well, then every other AI that's trained off of it, you know how to prompt it too. If you know how to prompt ChatGPT, you know how to prompt Magic School. If you know how to prompt ChatGPT, you know how to prompt Lebra that we just talked about. If you know how to prompt ChatGPT, you're going to know how to prompt almost any other AI tool that comes your way. And so we want teachers to get familiar with and used to prompting what I call it the mothership, right? If you know how the mothership works, you're going to figure out how you can do that as these AIs and more AIs are created based off those. So my recommendation right now is head over to ChatGPT when you're using this micro menu and really digging into learning how to prompt ChatGPT. And it'll make a lot more sense when you end up in Magic School or Diffit or any of these other programs. You'll see how they have customized it to do what they want to do. So that would be my recommendation right now as we get started.
And I think we have found in our trainings that often sets people up with the confidence to explore other tools, as you said. And I think, again, that's just been one of the keys is developing that confidence, realizing that you do not need to know all the things.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of maybe frustration and fear around how do I keep up with all of it? And that's where, again, we've really tried to lean into this idea of having a strategic approach for your AI literacy. We've developed this drive framework that we've been using in trainings that is working as an organizer so that schools and teams have a roadmap, right? Because Jeff, you and I follow tons of different thinkers and newsletters and all the things. But at the end of the day, we don't have more hours in the day now than we did years ago. So I do think having some kind of organizing principle can be really useful. And that's why I think we're going to continue to come back to our drive framework. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. If people haven't seen that yet, we've been sharing it a little bit on social media as well. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to talk about a shift that you've noticed when we use that framework.
Yeah. And again, I love this framework again that Trisha made because Trisha's amazing. Coming up with this drive framework. And again, you can find this on social media and stuff, but we've been using this framework now as a way to drive change and drive conversations inside districts. Trisha and I just finished doing the drive framework with a rural district here in Washington. And right now we're creating a 5-part series for educators in Alaska using this same framework. And again, to your point, it gives us like, where do I begin and where do I need to get to? And that's the idea of these frameworks. So the DRIVE framework, if you haven't seen it yet, real quick, DRIVE stands for dialogue, reimagine, interdependence, verify, and executive functioning. And so what we do is we custom create bespoke presentations based on your district and where your district is and walk you through where to get started in this. And I think it's such a great way to think about it. And if you're looking at it on social media, or again, we'll link to it in the show notes here, Trisha's done a great job of even asking yourself, what are some questions to get started with? Where do we get started in the dialogue, which is a lot of what this mega menu that you've created, menu for May, that you've created is really about the dialogues. Like, how do we start having dialogues in our schools? And that's really what this is about, is we've got to open up these conversations. We can't shy away from the conversations of generative AI in our schools. And that's where it all starts. And then we start thinking about, how do we start reimagining the questions and prompts that we're asking? How do we start reimagining how we use this? How do we start leveraging this tool in different perspectives? From there, then we start talking about what strategies can we use to leverage technology for deeper learning. And it's only by the time we get into this interdependence that we're starting to really think about, okay, what does this mean for me as a teacher with my students? We've got to understand what this means for us as teachers first. And then we start thinking about, okay, now that I have a baseline of understanding what this thing is doing, then we start thinking about, okay, what does this do for my students? How can I leverage this for deeper learning with my kids? And then we have ours on verifying. How do you start verifying what's there? What's the importance of media literacy and AI literacy? And then really taking a deep dive into executive functioning and what this looks like moving forward. So it's such a great framework, Trisha, that you've put together. I really appreciate it. And I know you've done this a couple times at different conferences too. Is there anything you want to add to what you like about the framework?
Just that I think it also reminds people that sometimes I know you hear AI literacy and you think, oh my goodness, what does this mean? This whole new thing. But the framework also taps back into the core literacies that we have been teaching for a while, intentionally as a reminder that those literacies are still super important. Media literacy and information literacy, I think, are even more important now. So the framework is also built with that in mind, that we're not saying AI literacy replaces the other literacies. We're saying, no, it's interwoven with a lot of the critical work that we've already been doing. And it looks to build on that. And again, a lot of it is just also driven by like good old fashioned literacy, being a critical consumer of information and also thinking about what it means to teach writing moving forward. So again, we'll link to that over there in the show notes. If you're following us on social media, it's quite possible that you have seen that. But if you've got questions about the trainings that we're offering around that, please do reach out. Our calendars are booking up really quickly. So if you've got a question about what that could look like, how we custom design it for your community, please reach out sooner rather than later. The email addresses are there. You can also just find that information at shiftingschools.com.
All right, Trisha, let's dig into one of these menus. If you have downloaded this, what you could do is pause here, go download the mega menu, and then you might want to go through it as we're talking about this next space. Or if you happen to be driving, don't download it now, just driving. When you get to school, we got a lot of people that listen to us when they drive to work. And if you do, please send us emails and say, yes, I loved listening to you when you drive to work. It always makes us feel good when we know where people are listening to us from. We're probably not the podcast you listen to when you're working out. We're not that kind of podcast.
Or
but I could see maybe, I don't know. We probably talk too much for a workout. We need some good background music or something for a workout, I think. But our first building community member, we wanted to talk about two of our favorite prompts and how might you use it. Trisha, why don't you go first on this building community framework? Which prompt do you really like, and talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So for those of you who haven't downloaded it yet, when you download it, what you're going to find is 6 different mega prompts, right? And as we said at the beginning, you don't have to do all of them. Find one that works for you. And each week we're taking a different themed approach. So the theme for week 1 is building community. how might I use prompt craft, or again, writing with a generative AI tool? How can I use this to foster classroom community, school community? So we've got 6 options for you to choose from. I'm going to highlight just one, and that is the one entitled, "Which analogy fits for you?" And I'm going to read out the prompt. Generate a list of 10 analogies for a classroom. Focus on generating analogies that can be understood by, here's where you would enter the age range or the classroom or the subject, the information about who your learners are. Give a range of different analogies that pull ideas from sports or fashion or music. Include at least one example that references the landscape in, and that's where you put in the specific details of your location, what it looks like around your community. So you're then going to get this great list of analogies. Listeners of this show probably have noticed maybe that I like thinking in analogies.
You love thinking in analogies.
I do. And that's my literature teacher training. And I love playing around with this because it's so interesting for me to see which analogies it might come up with that perhaps I didn't think of. And again, what I would imagine doing with this is I'd present that list to my students, and I would maybe ask them to pick one that feels like, yeah, this does really connect with our classroom. Or I might do it just for a unit. We're coming up on end of school year, looking back at this school year, which of those analogies really matches and why? Or I might have my students come up with item 11 or 12. Again, I think challenging students, can you think even more outside of the bot than the chat bot here? But again, it's just really interesting to see when you go in there and you customize like what you want the analogies to be about for who. Does it make accurate connections to your location? Or what detail do you need to add to get a more accurate one? So that's from the list of 6, that's the one that I'll highlight today.
And what I like about this is I'm already, as you're talking, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's 2 different ways you can use this. Number one, you as a teacher can copy and paste this prompt. If your kids don't have access to a generative AI tool for whatever reason, you as a teacher can copy and paste this, put this into ChatGPT, and then use the responses, copy and paste that, copy and paste the responses that your generative AI tool gives you into a Google Doc or a Word doc, and share that with kids and do exactly what you said, right? Or I'm going to pretend that my kids do have access to ChatGPT. I might take this, and instead of doing the work for them, I'm going to give them, and I always call them with students when I'm doing work with students, is I call them starter prompts. I'm going to give you, and this is what I say to my students, I'm going to give you a starter prompt. It's right here on this Google Doc. And every kid is going to copy and paste that starter prompt into their AI. Now, because it's generative, that's what the G stands for, and GPT is generative, all of my students are going to get different analogies. And now you've started the conversation. What analogies do we like? What analogies fit? What analogies do you think is the best one for you? If you were going to add 2 more analogies to that list, what would the next analogy be? The other thing I like about this is you then, if you were going to do this as a starter prompt, where you fill in the age range, you would already do that for your students, right? You would put in the age range of, say, and I was a 4th grade teacher, so I always think that way. I would just say for 10 and 11-year-olds, right? And then what I would do, and the location, I taught in Aberdeen, Washington, so I would put Aberdeen, Washington there. But what I might do is change where kids can customize it. So I would change this prompt. If I was going to use this as a starter prompt for students, this is what it would say. Generate a list of 10 analogies for a classroom. Focus on generating analogies that can be understood by 10 and 11-year-olds. Give a range of different analogies that pull ideas from student fill in the blank. Include at least one example that references the landscape in Aberdeen, Washington. And what I want students to do is start understanding they can personalize it. Because if I'm teaching 10 and 11 years olds, I want a kid that's in Minecraft, give me analogies that are about Minecraft. If I have a kid that's into unicorns, give me analogies about unicorns. Give me analogies about the Seattle Mariners. Give me analogies that include, and kids then get to customize it. So it's not just analogies about some random sports team or random fashion or random music. It could be analogies that include Taylor Swift, if that's what the kid's into. And now you're customizing that output. And what a great way for kids to learn analogies when it is even more meaningful to me. And so there's 2 ways you can use this. You as a teacher do it, give kids the output and then have a great conversation around analogies, or have the kids customize it for themselves and start getting kids to critically think about, how do I customize these things to do exactly what I want to do in the language that I need it? And I think that's the power of the generative part. I'm still finding, and I don't know if you feel this way, we're not leaning into the ability that it does. When we say generative, it's something brand new every single time to every single person. There is so much power in that in our classrooms to differentiate on the fly for every kid, to personalize that response to every single student. And I still feel like that part, we're still struggling to really lean into that.
And that's where you've got to get in there and experiment.
Yeah.
So, again, as a former literature teacher, ELA teachers who teach diction, word choice, this is such a cool way to do that, because in that prompt, there's the line, focus on generating analogies that can be understood by. What if I change understood and I swap in appreciate or adored or celebrated, and then take a look at how the list changes? Because it's fascinating, Jeff. I've even been experimenting with asking a tool like ChatGPT, please evoke the emotion of, and picking out different emotions and seeing like, where is it really differentiating, or where is, oh, that's still pretty similar to the other output. But what a great way to really talk about the power of word choice and diction.
And it's not just word choice, Trisha. I want everybody to understand this. Prompt Engineering 101 right here in the podcast, if you're just getting started. It's not about just every word. It's about the verb. If you're doing any work around verbs, like I want to walk into a classroom where up on the wall, it's all the verbs that we use, right? You just use the word evoke. I never would have used that word. I'm thinking, oh, what a great verb. What do I want you to do? I want you to invoke feeling. We can replace the verb understood or understand. And understand, that was weird, but understand that the most important words that you feed these generative AI tools are the verbs. That's the most important part. There is critical thinking in that. There is standards in that. When people are saying, what are kids going to do? How's this replacing writing? I'm like, are you kidding me? This is making writing. You have to be so thoughtful, because the verb that you choose, the difference between understand and evoke, two different complete outcomes.
Yeah.
The verb is the power. If you take nothing else away from this podcast, the verb is the power of the prompt.
And that's where, when you're looking at the menu, again, the menu has 6 different templates to get started with. You'll notice that they are framed differently. Sometimes it starts with please generate. Sometimes it starts with pretend you are, or offer. And again, notice that, swap those out. And that's where, again, we've tried to set up this free guide so that you can have a community-based experience. In closing here, we would really recommend those of you who have ever been a part of a hackathon, try out, even if you just have 15 minutes, a 15-minute prompt hackathon. Take a look at this menu, see what new ideas come out of just 15 minutes of experimenting, building your own, really playing with different verbs, as you mentioned, word choice. Take a look at the different kind of formation of these prompts and see what you think works best. If you teach high school students, I would imagine doing like a 15-minute prompt hackathon, like on a weekly basis with my older students.
And I think part of that hackathon too is, again, if I'm teaching this today, and I just did this with a group of high school kids this week, last week, sometime, but we did this where I gave them the starter prompt and then they get the output. And the next question is, what's the next best prompt? What a great, talk about critical thinking. Based on this output, what's your next best prompt? And what a great question to be asking kids. What do you want to know next? What verbs are going to get you what you need next? That's how you use these chatbots. We have to understand that these chatbots are made to interact with. It is not capital N-O-T. You put in one prompt and you copy and paste what it gave you. That is not how you use these. They are made to interact with. This is a starter prompt. From there, what's your next best prompt? What's your next best prompt? I tell this in every training that I'm in right now. This is a Jeff rule, not a generative AI rule. But you do not allow or you do not copy anything out of a generative AI tool like ChatGPT until you've prompted a minimum of 3 times. Because I want that critical thinking. It's not about the first prompt. The first prompt makes me think about something that gives me my next prompt. And then my output is even better. And then I want to critically think about that output and what's my next prompt. A minimum of 3 prompts. So when we're training kids on this, when we're interacting with kids, can we say, look, we're going to be using generative AI today, but you need to prompt it a minimum of 5 times before we have a conversation. And part of that conversation is, what was your prompt? Why did you choose that verb? What do you think that verb did based on that verb? Or turn and talk to your neighbor. What verb did you choose? Did they choose? And compare and contrast your outcomes and how were they different? Oh my gosh, the conversations in the classroom, Trisha. I want to go back in a classroom.
And again, that's where part of our covert agenda with these menus is not only to get you to generate your own, but to document them in a way that's public, because for that person who maybe just tried like a one-off 1-sentence prompt and they're thinking like, didn't do what I wanted, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
They need to see different ways, different use cases. So this is also hopefully really promoting, be transparent. What did you try that worked? And then how did you improve it? Because I think those are the stories that matter so much. So if you try that out, if you host a 15-minute prompt hackathon or your school is using this menu, we'd love to hear from you. And again, at Shifting Schools, we're really big about building AI literacy in a community. And that's why we have our AI for PLC asynchronous pathway. As listeners of this show, you can take $25 off and purchase it today for just $50. The code is SSPod25. That's over there in the show notes. Again, that's another way of cultivating some AI literacy, not on your own, because that's not going to create a shift that's sustainable, but working together with peers. And we always say, 2 people, that can be a team.
Yeah. And that code, remember, SSPod25 takes $25 off anything that over there that we offer for you as a podcast listener. Head over to shiftingschools.com and see if there's something in there. We ended up doing a webinar on feedback with AI. If that is something that you're interested in, it'll take $25 off of that too. So there's just all kinds of things over there that we're here to support you with. But Trisha, what a great menu to get us started here in our micro menu for the month of May. This one is all about building communities. We went over one of the 6 today. But dig in there. And again, these are starter prompts for you. Copy, paste them, see what they do, see what the outcome is. And hopefully we'll see you here next week. You'll hear us again next week when we're going to dig deeper into this micro menu. And we're going to be looking at the feedback prompts. So appreciate you listening this week. Trisha, any final words before we sign off?
Just again, like if you come up with a new idea, we love hearing from listeners. I feel like every email that we receive from a listener, they usually started out with, not even sure if you read these. We read them. We love getting that email feedback. So if this helps you in any way, we'd love to hear about the new ideas you have. That's info@shiftingschools.com. And we're back next week with a whole new micro menu to play with.
Thanks, Trisha.
Thanks, Jeff.